Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's webinar presented by International Security Training. My name is Brian Allen, and I will be your instructor this evening. Today we're going to be focusing on handling kidnapping and extortion calls. So we have a three-pronged agenda for today. We're going to be talking about responding to the initial call. We're going to look at having or developing a kidnapping and extortion call checklist, and also look at who's going to make this decision. When a key stakeholder, a CEO, a very important person of a company gets kidnapped, are we going to pay the ransom or not? So we're going to look at that. When it comes to responding to the initial call, most contacts are made via phone, hence the call. Okay, but you got to remember that really only two places are going to be called. Normally it will be the residence where this person lives, or it will be the company for which they work or represent. So you have two areas or two groups of people, if you will, that are going to need to be trained in addition to your security staff. Now, we need to remind everybody to treat all calls as legitimate. The closest thing to this scenario that I guess I can think of is that of a bomb threat. Okay, so normally most companies are going to go through annual safety training, and responding to a bomb threat should be one of the things that they train employees on, as well as the security staff. You have to train on a consistent basis when it comes to extortion or kidnapping calls. And when you do your training, whether it's a tabletop exercise, whether it's a joint task force type of exercise, you don't just want your emergency response team members or your crisis management team members to be the ones involved in this training. They're going to be the ones running the show, but you still want to train your regular employees. You want to be training the family members of the VIP. Why? Because they are probably going to be the initial people to make contact with the bad guys. All right, so you need to bring them into the training right off the bat. Now, taking this amateur, if you will, the call taker, they need to have an overall tone. And this is easier said than done once the fear and adrenaline of the situation gets brought into the mix. Okay, but they need to be calm, and they need to put out a patient type of tone, and they're going to be explaining to the kidnappers or the extortionists that they have a certain lack of authority. Why would they have to be explaining that? Because there's normally a point in the call, the discussion, where the kidnappers are going to demand immediate compliance with what they're asking for. So that is when the person's going to have to say, I'm going to try to pass all of this information, all of your demands on to my superiors as soon as I can. I would take care of this if I could, but I just don't have the authority. So let me repeat back to you, blank, 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 and we would go from there. All right, and that's the repetition. You'll always repeat back the demands to the bad guys just to ensure that you heard and understood what they are asking for. As we move on to a checklist, again, like I mentioned earlier, these checklists are going to be similar to the ones that in America the FBI has created for bomb threats. Okay, so they have a bomb threat checklist. Now, a lot of my friends and students, you guys are all out in different countries, right? So whether you're in Germany, whether you're in France, South Africa, Canada, wherever you're at, please go to your local, your state, your provincial, or your federal government and find what checklists they put out, because that is going to be a huge help for you. If you can't get one there and you do have kidnapping and ransom insurance, look for the insurance company's checklist. A lot of times they are a wealth of information when it comes to setting up a crisis management plan. So what's the person going to do? Hopefully the company has already created the checklist. It's going to be in a flow format from top to bottom, and they're going to be gathering the basics. Okay, they're going to take in the initial statement from the bad guy, and here I say we're going to cover the 5 W's. So that's going to be the who, what, where, when of this situation. Okay, also at the top, hopefully you have the a line that says, the call began at this time, the call ended at this time. You're going to want to have the date and also the name of the person who took the call. So make sure they write their name on there. Also, you're going to have to ask specifically is what do the bad guys want? If it's money, is it property, is it another person? You're going to get that first piece of information. Then you're going to say, okay, how would you like it to be delivered? Okay, so you need to ask them that. You're also going to want to ask to speak to the victim. Okay, so just say, can I speak to the victim? Are they harmed? You have to make it seem like you're very much concerned with their safety, and I'm sure you will be, or the person taking the call will be. But this is really, or in addition to that, it's a way to check and see if this is a legitimate threat or if it's a false call. Okay, so and then we go back to make sure on your paper you're putting down when you tell them that you're relaying the information that you've just received to your superiors. Okay. Now, if you're talking to the victims, remember the use of code words. And this should have been trained into your staff and your security personnel many, many months earlier during the trainings that I talked about in the beginning of this webinar. You want to have certain things that you would say to the victim, and then once they hear the certain words, they're going to come back with a reply. You're going to know that number one, you really are talking to your VIP, and number two, that this is a legitimate threat. That this situation is real, and you need to pass that along. Okay, so let's talk about the bad guy details. This checklist, just like any bomb threat checklist, is going to be demanding a certain amount of professional attention out of the call taker. Okay, so this might be your receptionist, it might be the spouse of the victim. They're going to have to try to determine the gender of the caller. How old is this person? They're going to try to pick up on any accents that the person is using. They're also going to, or just not that they're using, but that they have. They want to pay specific attention to the call because maybe if they're lucky, they're going to determine that this person actually sounds familiar to them. Okay? In a lot of cases, the kidnappers are not too far from the situation. Okay? And I hope that makes sense. Is there anything unusual about their voice or speech? Okay? Is the person pissed off? I'm sorry, are they angry? Are they excited? Are they stuttering? Things like that. Do they have a lisp? Okay, maybe they have something like that going on. Are there any background noises? Do they hear military trucks in the background? Do they hear gunfire? Do they hear the sounds of a mall? Do they hear music? Okay. Are they near a bus station or a metro, a train station, something like that? You really want to pick things up like that. And really, it might sound basic, but the reason why you need a check sheet is again because of that adrenaline and excitement or fear of the situation. A lot of the call takers will not remember to ask these things unless they have it written down in front of them. So please use a checklist. Now, decision time. Okay, let's say that your employee has just received this call about your VIP. This person really has been kidnapped. They pass all this information on to you and the senior leadership. Now they have to make a decision. Are they going to pay the ransom or not? Senior leadership, the board of directors, like the slide says, they are going to make this decision. Okay, this will not be the head of security that makes this decision. So that is something that you have to pay attention to. Now, yes, kidnapping and ransom insurance are very popular. It also in some places is called key stakeholder insurance. And depending on the company that you're talking about, they may have both of these insurance products, but there are different aspects to them. So you have to know, first of all, what type of insurance product you have. And when I say you, I mean the group of decision makers here. Now, there are no ransom policies that are popular in many industries and many companies. They have to throw that out there because they don't want the bad guys to think that they're automatically going to get paid should they kidnap one of their CEOs or one of their VIPs. But honestly, I've been doing this business for 20 years, and my mentors have been doing it a lot longer than I have. In most cases that I've seen myself and that they have told me about, the companies are going to end up paying the ransom. Okay, if they don't have a security team or an HRT team, which is a hostage rescue team, that can launch immediately and just go grab their VIP, they're going to pay it. And the reason why is, what if everything goes wrong? They have to run the media check on this situation. If the VIP gets killed or gets harmed and the media gets a hold of it, they're going to say, well, the company, the corporate monsters didn't pay, and the VIP got hurt. So they don't want that kind of mess, all right? They don't want the family repercussions, of dealing with this. So they're probably going to pay. Now that's just the humanity of the situation. There's also a pretty good monetary reason for paying also. Let's say, the bad guys are asking for $100 million for this CEO. Well, look at what CEOs get paid nowadays, okay? They get paid hundreds of $1,000,000 a year. So the real worth of that victim to the company, in most cases, is going to far exceed the average ransoms that are asked. So, you gotta kind of look at that situation as well. We're hitting up at a little over 11 minutes now, so let's wrap this whole thing up. Kidnapping and extortion is a very important issue. It has been overseas, for the last 40 to 50 years. In the last 20 years, it's becoming increasingly more important for companies here in the U.S., especially those of us, and Europe, when we're sending our employees overseas to the more volatile parts of the world. So you got to have a kidnapping and extortion plan in place. You got to have a crisis management team in place under a good, solid crisis management policy. Okay, you need to train your employees, and you need to get real about this. Okay, it should be developed. This policy should be developed as soon as possible. Now, if you're a new security manager or director, you take over the programs for a new company, and you see that one of these does not exist in your department, go check HR before you start developing your own, because it might be in the human resources department. Okay. And I know throughout the last 12 minutes we've talked about mainly money, but we need to consider the fact that this whole thing might not be about money. It might not be about money at all. It might be about the release of prisoners. Okay? It might be about the terrorists or the bad guys' request for you to make a certain political decision, okay, that favors them. Who's going to find out about this first? That initial call taker that we talked about a few minutes ago. They're the ones who are going to be writing this down. They're going to find out what the bad guys want. Do they want money, release of prisoners, political pressure? Are they just trying to make a statement and instill fear into people, which is what terrorism is all about, instilling fear? So, that being said, oops, I bumped the thing. I know this is a real quick overview of kidnapping and extortion. There are many books on it. I went to a school years ago called Executive Security International. I would recommend that if you guys have a decent amount of money laying around, or you can get your hands on a student loan, please go to that school. It is well worth the investment. We have our canines barking in the background, so if you hear that, I apologize. They must have hit on something. But ESI is probably one of the best schools out there. Our school, we deal with smaller courses and online courses, but ESI is a great course. They have, the masters of this type of thing, teaching and instructing over there. So go ahead and do that. But if you don't have the money for that, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be reading up on it. Go to the libraries. Go to Amazon.com. Buy books on this topic and improve yourself and your security team's knowledge today. So until next time, my name is Brian Allen with International Security Training. Stay safe.